She walked in at exactly 7 o'clock. That was the first thing he noticed, her punctuality. The second thing was her eyes. Dark, thoughtful, carrying something he couldn't quite name. Recognition? Amusement? She wore a simple blue dress, and when she smiled, something in his chest shifted uncomfortably. "David?" Her voice was softer than he'd imagined from their brief phone conversation. "That's me." "You must be Sarah." He stood, nearly knocking over his water glass, catching it just in time. Smooth, real smooth. She slid into the booth across from him and for a moment just watched him. Not in the way people usually did on blind dates, that quick assessment of whether you matched your photos, whether you were worth the next hour of their time. This was different. She was studying him like he was a painting she'd seen before but couldn't quite place. "I have to admit," she said, folding her hands on the table, "I was surprised when your sister reached out to me." David laughed nervously. "Yeah, Jennifer's pretty determined. She's convinced I'm going to die alone surrounded by cats, which is ironic because I'm allergic." Sarah smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "You don't remember me, do you?" The question landed between them like a stone dropped in still water. David felt his face flush. Had they met before? He searched her features, looking for something familiar. Maybe she'd been at one of Jennifer's parties, a colleague from years ago? The silence stretched too long, and he knew his confusion was written all over his face. I'm sorry. Should I?" She leaned back, and something flickered across her expression. Not disappointment, exactly, but perhaps resignation. It was a long time ago, 15 years. "You probably meet a lot of people." "Try me," he said, leaning forward. "I'm terrible with faces, but I promise I didn't mean to forget." Sarah took a breath, and when she spoke, her voice carried the weight of a story she'd been holding on to for a very long time. It was December 2010. The 23rd, actually. You were coming out of a grocery store on 5th Street, the one that's a CVS now. It was snowing. Do you remember that year? The blizzard that shut down half the city? David nodded slowly. He remembered that storm. He'd just started his first real job after college, was living in that cramped apartment with the radiator that never quite worked. "I was sitting outside that store," Sarah continued, her voice quieter now, "on the bench by the entrance. I had 2 bags with me, everything I owned in the world at that moment. I was 23 years old, and I'd just been evicted from my apartment. Lost my job 3 weeks before Christmas. My family, we weren't speaking. Pride, mostly. Stupid pride on both sides." David's throat tightened. He had a sudden flash of memory, snow falling like static, his arms full of groceries, the bitter wind cutting through his coat. "I was trying to figure out where I was going to sleep that night," Sarah said. "The shelters were full. I'd already checked. I was running through options in my head, each one worse than the last. And then this guy came out of the store, struggling with too many bags, and he dropped one right in front of me. Oranges went everywhere." David's hand moved unconsciously to his face. He remembered. God, he remembered now. The bag had split, fruit rolling across the frozen pavement. "You helped me pick them up," he whispered. "You helped me pick them up," she corrected gently. "And while we were there on our hands and knees in the snow, gathering oranges, you looked at me. Really looked at me. Not past me the way most people had been doing for weeks, and you asked if I was okay." David closed his eyes. The memory was flooding back now, sharp and clear. Her face had been red from the cold, her eyes hollow with exhaustion. He'd seen something in her expression that had stopped him cold, a kind of desperate courage, the look of someone trying very hard not to break. "I told you I was fine," Sarah continued. "Because that's what you say, right? Even when you're drowning, especially then. But you didn't leave. You sat down on that bench next to me in the middle of a snowstorm. And you said, 'I don't mean to pry, but you don't look fine. And I know what not fine looks like.'" He had said that. He'd been thinking about his mother, who'd struggled with depression his whole childhood, who'd taught him to recognize the signs of someone barely holding on. "You told me you'd just bought food for Christmas dinner. Said you were cooking for one? But you'd bought enough for an army because you'd never learned to shop for just yourself." Sarah's eyes were bright now, but she wasn't crying. "And then you did something I still can't quite believe. 15 years later, you handed me half your groceries. Just like that. Gave me a bag full of food. Actual good food, not just canned goods, but the nice stuff. Turkey, fresh vegetables, a pie that probably cost more than I'd spent on food in a week. David remembered the weight of the bag, the way she'd tried to refuse, how he'd insisted. But that wasn't even the most incredible part, Sarah said. When I tried to say no, tried to tell you I couldn't accept it, you pulled out your wallet and handed me $200, cash. You said, she paused, her voice catching. You said, my mom always told me that the measure of a person isn't what they do when people are watching, but what they do when nobody would ever know. Nobody's watching right now, so let me be a good person. The coffee shop seemed to fade away. David could feel the cold of that night. Could see her face, younger, thinner, afraid but trying so hard not to show it. You made me promise to use it for a hotel room, Sarah continued. Made me promise to get warm and get safe. And then you gave me your phone number and told me to call you after Christmas if I needed help finding job listings. You said you weren't rich or connected, but you knew how to search online and you had time to help. Did you call? David asked, his voice rough. I did, 3 days later. You answered on the second ring. You helped me find job postings, taught me how to format my resume on the computer at the library, even drove me to 2 interviews. She smiled, and this time it did reach her eyes. You probably don't remember that either. It was such a small thing for you. It wasn't small, David said. Or, I mean, I didn't think of it as small or big. You needed help. I could help. That seemed like enough reason. That's why I'm here, Sarah said simply. When your sister found me on LinkedIn and told me she was trying to set you up, that you'd been having a rough time, that you were lonely and doubted whether you had anything to offer anyone. I knew I had to meet you, because I need you to understand something, David. What you did that night, it saved my life. David shook his head. I just gave you some groceries and... You gave me hope, Sarah interrupted. You gave me proof that kindness still existed in the world, that I was worth being kind to. I got one of those jobs you helped me find. Started rebuilding, went back to school, reconnected with my family eventually. Met my daughter's father. That didn't work out, but I got Lily, and she's the best thing that ever happened to me. She pulled out her phone, showed him a picture of a smiling 14-year-old with her mother's eyes. I own my own business now. I employ 6 people. I volunteer at a shelter every week and every Christmas. I sit outside a grocery store and I help people who are where I was. I do it because of you, because you showed me what it looks like to just be human to another human being. David felt tears threatening, fought them back. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything. I just needed you to know. Your sister told me you've been feeling like you haven't done enough with your life, like you haven't made a difference. She thought maybe meeting someone new would help. And she mentioned in passing what you did back. Then she didn't realize. It was me at first, but I knew. I knew it was you? I'm glad you're okay, David managed. I'm glad you're more than okay, but I'm still just... me. I'm still someone who goes to work and comes home and can't figure out why nothing seems to stick. 2 divorces, no kids. A job I'm good at but don't love. What difference does any of that make? Sarah reached across the table and took his hand. Her grip was firm, warm, certain. 15 years ago, you were young and barely making rent yourself. You'd probably spent most of your money on those groceries. But you saw someone who needed help and you helped them. No cameras, no social media to post about it, no credit or recognition. You just did it because it was right. That's not nothing, David, that's everything. The coffee had gone cold between them, but neither moved to call for fresh cups. Outside, the city moved on, people rushing past with their own stories, their own struggles, their own small acts of kindness waiting to ripple outward into futures they'd never see. So, Sarah said finally, a slight smile playing at her lips, your sister thought this was a setup for romance. I should be honest, I'm seeing someone. Have been for 2 years. But I think maybe we both needed this conversation for different reasons. David laughed, surprised by the sound of it. I think you're right. I think maybe I needed to remember who I was, or who I'm capable of being. You're still that person, Sarah said firmly. The person who stops in a snowstorm to help a stranger. That doesn't change just because life gets hard. If anything, going through hard things should remind us why kindness matters. They talked for another hour about her business, his work, her daughter, his sister's increasingly creative attempts at matchmaking. When they finally stood to leave, Sarah hugged him tightly. "Thank you," she whispered. "For then and for now, for being willing to meet a stranger who turned out not to be a stranger at all." Walking home that night, David felt something he hadn't experienced in months, a kind of quiet joy, a sense of purpose. He'd spent so long measuring his life by the big milestones he hadn't reached that he'd forgotten about the small moments that actually mattered, the times when he'd chosen kindness over convenience, compassion over indifference. He thought about the version of himself who'd sat in the snow 15 years ago, who'd given away half his Christmas dinner without hesitation. That person was still inside him, just buried under disappointment and self-doubt. His phone buzzed. A text from Sarah. "Same time next month? I make a point of staying in touch with the people who matter. Also, Lily wants to meet the guy from Mom's favorite story." David smiled and typed back, "I'd like that." And for the first time in a long time, he meant it.